Hi everyone, I'm Ivan.
And Chongkit.
We hope that you have watched our previous video on constellations. If not, please do watch it. Continuing with our series of basic astronomy, we'll be learning more about the moon today.
Let us firstly talk about Earth's moon. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite. A natural satellite is a celestial body that orbits around another body just like a planet. Its composition is actually quite similar to Earth because it was formed after a supermassive object smashed into Earth millions of years ago. Naturally, there will be debris flung out from Earth, and so after a while these debris clump together and thus our moon is formed.
Also, have you ever wondered what would happen if the Earth didn't have the moon? Well, the Earth's moon is actually pretty large in comparison to the size of the Earth, making it quite important for several reasons. Because of the moon's mass, it has a stabilizing effect on the Earth's axis of rotation, preventing excess wobbling and drastic climate changes. Other planets like Mars do not have such a large moon to stabilize its rotation, and oftentimes the poles can drift almost to the equator. Now imagine what would happen if Earth wobbled just as much as Mars. Perhaps it was because we had the moon that climates were stable enough for life to take shape.
Now we'll share more about the physical parameters of the moon. The moon is about one quarter the size of Earth and weighs over 80 times less. While you often see the moon as the biggest source of light in the night sky, the moon does not actually produce its own light. Instead, it reflects light from the sun. Sometimes, the moon also appears to be bright white in the night sky, but in fact, the moon's surface is almost as dark as a root surface.
Now, let's talk about the phases of the moon. There are actually several phases of the moon, or if you like a simpler term, phases of the moon. Most of you would know the common terms like full moon, but the four main new phases that you are going to learn today are the gibbous, waxing, waning, and the new moon. Let's start with the new moon first. The new moon is just the opposite of the full moon. So during a new moon, the Earth faces the dark side of the moon, so we won't be able to see the moon then. Ever wondered what you call the shape of the moon between its half moon phase and the crescent moon phase? Well, that's called a gibbous. It has the shape that is sort of like the opening of your eye. Not a circle, but neither is it a semicircle. Alright, so moving on, we know that the moon has phases and they happen in cycles. However, we need to know the direction of this cycle as well. For example, if today is a half moon, we need to know if tomorrow will be a gibbous or a crescent. So that's where the waxing and waning term comes in. A waxing moon would mean that the phases of the moon is ultimately moving towards a full moon, and a waning phase means a move towards a new moon. Waxing and waning usually starts from the crescent all the way till they reach their intended phase. So next time someone tells you that the moon is a waxing gibbous, you know that it will be a full moon in the next few days.
Have you ever noticed we are always viewing the same side of the moon? Why is this so? This happens because the moon is in synchronous rotation with the Earth, meaning to say that it rotates about its own axis in almost the same time it takes to orbit Earth. The side of the moon that we always looking at it is called the near side, while the side of the moon that we never get to see is called the far side. Despite this synchronous rotation, we get to see more than 50% of the moon's surface over the entire lunar cycle due to the effect called lunar libration. Lunar libration is the phenomenon at which we get to see more of the lunar surface due to the way at which it orbits the Earth and also the angle we are looking at it. The moon's revolution around Earth is not a perfectly circular, and this results in the distance between the moon and Earth to vary. When the moon is closest to the Earth in its orbit, it's called a perigee, and when the moon is furthest from the Earth in its orbit, it's called an apogee.
Now, let's talk about the features that we can see on the moon. One of the most obvious things that you can perhaps see are lunar craters. These actually pockmark the moon and give it the look of Swiss cheese. They are usually formed by impacts from asteroids and meteoroids. Because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, many objects are free to reach the surface. On Earth, most of these space rocks would have burned up in the atmosphere before reaching us. Another prominent feature that you'll perhaps see are the dark patches strewn right across the moon. These patches are known as mare, which are made up of solidified magma. They are thought to form mostly on the moon's near side because the Earth's gravity attracts the magma. So these actually triggered volcanic eruptions during the early days of the moon.
Now I'm going to share more about the myth of the moon. You'll probably have heard quite a number of myths about the moon, but what are they? Some people have said that the moon appears larger at the horizon, but this is merely a myth and is actually a psychological effect called the moon illusion. When the moon is high in the sky, it is usually the largest object that our naked eye can see. But when the moon is low in the sky, we are able to compare its size to nearby buildings. It's difficult to explain in words, but I'm sure you have seen optical illusions, where two lines of the same length but with different arrowhead directions appear to be of different lengths. There's another myth that says that there's a bunny up there. Don't know how much you believe that, but it's props mainly from the fact that the dark spots on the moon forms a bunny shape. So people began to create myths to explain how it got there. Personally, I think it more looks like a crab with one pincer.
Well, there are of course other moons from other planets. Some of them are actually much more interesting than others. For example, Saturn, with the famous rings, has the most number of moons orbiting it. Its largest moon, Titan, actually has active volcanoes. These volcanoes don't actually spew lava, but instead they spew liquid methane. Another interesting fact is that Venus and Mercury are the only planets in the solar system that do not have moons. Even good old Pluto has a moon of its own. There are also many more moons to be named here, simply because each planet can have several moons. Because of time limit, it's not possible to list down all of them, but you can always feel free to ask any of our NUS Astronomical Society members, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. With that, we'll end off here. Clear skies, everyone.